Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless. Today we're going to be going over the results of the Metagame challenge from last weekend. In Discord, I opened up a Discord channel where people could share the results as they came in, and I've compiled everything into a big spreadsheet. Now, before we go over all of these numbers here, I'd like to point out this is a very unscientific analysis. There's a lot of bias in the data, meaning that there's selection bias, that people had to come with me with their data, they had to choose to report to me, and we're not going to necessarily follow a scientific process in analyzing this. We're just going to look at it, make some comments, just for fun in this video. And what's really cool this time is this is our fourth time doing it in Discord. I've done it for the last 4 metagame challenges, and there's one every 3 months. So we're actually going to look at past data and see how the meta has evolved, because the timeless meta has gone pretty slow in the last year. Ever since it became a energy and show and tell format after Modern Horizons, it has stayed not exactly the same, of course, but those two decks have stayed top dogs on and off for that whole time. So it'll be interesting to see how the format has changed. So first up, looking at the table of every single run that we had, yes, Energy with Allure's Companion and Show and Tell are the two best decks in the format right now. Show and Tell is back up in an uptick. If you asked me 3 months ago, I actually wouldn't call Show and Tell a top 2 deck anymore. It had really fallen off. There was a lot of fast combo in the format. There were a lot of things that were trying to prey on it, and it seemed like it had fallen behind in the meta. It doesn't unplayable, it just wasn't the best deck anymore. But the deck got a lot of new tools in Dragonstorm. It got a new 3-mana card advantage engine, and it also got Carpet of Hours as an insane sideboard card. So I think it is back to being the best deck in the format. I think Ident Energy has flip-flopped. If you asked me in the past, I would say these two are the best decks, but Energy is slightly better. But I think with the current card pool and the current format, Show and Tell is just a smidge better when we're looking at the meta build and good pilots on each deck. Of course, we could like split hairs and debate, oh, what would a new player do better with? But these two decks are back to being the clear-cut 1 and 2. Show and Tell is on the up and up. If you look at the win rates here, they actually posted very similar win rates. And again, I said there's a lot of bias in this data. So the 80% win rate, it is believable if you understand that bias. You have to know that it's mostly good players who are trying to win in the metagame challenge, spiking the metagame challenge, so the number is going to inflate, and then people don't tend to report their bad results, even if I ask them to be honest. Some people just forget, some people just won't do it. So that'll inflate the numbers. But if you have played the metagame challenge, you'll realize there's a lot of people who are format tourists. There's a lot of people who don't come with meta decks. So it's really easy to beat up on these guys, especially in like the first 3 rounds or so of the metagame challenge, because you get paired on number of wins that you have. The first round is almost always a bye against somebody who's just playing a Final Fantasy starter deck, which is cool. It's cool to see people trying Magic, but unfortunately they stumbled into the wrong queue. And that's why you see so few runs overall. These are the total summed numbers up here. Less than 10% actually ended at 0 wins, and you would think that people would have a 50-50 coin toss win rate, but that's not quite how this metagame challenge usually shakes out. So these win rates are somewhat believable, and I went over my personal stats for not just this metagame challenge, but also the previous ones, and I have got a 75 roughly win rate this time, and I think slightly higher in the previous one. So I can totally believe that like the best players in my Discord, when they're tryharding, can get close to an 80 win rate when they are playing the best deck against players who aren't necessarily the best. And the reason I point out these win rates is because I went through the previous data. I posted a screenshot of this in Discord. I went to the first time we did this, which was August of last year, 9 months ago. Right after the dust settled in MH3 and people figured out Mardu Energy was busted, Mardu Energy and Show and Tell, again, had a 79 and 80 win rate. It was switched. Show and Tell had 80 point something, Mardu had 79 point something, but it was wild. And they were the 2 largest sample size decks as well. Kind of crazy how consistent that is, and I'll remind you all that absolutely nothing ever happens in this format, not once. But everything below that, things are happening. The meta is changing. It's changing enough to the point where you see the categories here on the right. I actually added a new one. I split combo up into fast combo and slow combo. Because the decks do play quite differently, and we are in a very heavy combo meta right now, it made sense to split it into 2 categories. If you have one category being over half of the decks, you should probably split it up. In my opinion, the differentiation between fast combo and slow combo is whether or not the decks are playing reactive interaction in game 1. Fast combo decks are things that are just trying to do their plan and goldfish it as fast as possible in game 1, and then in games 2 and 3 they're doing the absolute minimum to interact, like bringing in an LA Line of Sanctity or something. These decks can play cards like Grief, but Grief is part of their strategy. It is incidental that happens to be interaction. Whereas a slow combo deck, in my opinion, is leveraging counter magic. It is leveraging, in this case, Fury. It is actually trying to play magic for several turns, control the board through the first few turns, and then assemble its win turn 3 or later, as opposed to the Degenerate Dark Ritual decks that would like to go as soon as possible, as quick as possible every single time. The categories are a little bit blurry, but I did try my best to categorize these into the broad categories. So we see lots of fast combo. This time we saw the rise of the slot machine. Slot machine as an archetype showed up probably 2 or 3 months ago, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, it is the all-in show and tell plus reanimate deck, where you're not trying to win with Omnitel on the same turn, you're just show and telling an Attrax into play and seeing if your opponent can deal with it. And that deck is quite good for beating up people in the metagame challenge who aren't necessarily ready for it. It is very good at winning the first and second game against the Final Fantasy starter deck, right? And we even got 7-0s with it. My 7-0 this time was indeed with the slot machine deck. I tried it out. It was super fun. I had lots of fun jamming the deck, and it overall actually had an 80.4 win rate, which is the highest win rate out of these decks that have a big sample size up here, which is really interesting. I mean, it's highest by a smidge. It's barely higher than Mardu. That's within error. If I actually did statistical analysis here and put error bars on these things, within error, it would be less than show and tell and Mardu sometimes, depending on the error bars. But it is really cool to see this deck here. By the way, if you don't know this deck, you're still not sure what I'm talking about, all these things are in the Discord server where we do this data collection. So feel free to join the Timeless Discord that I happen to run. Right. BW Belcher, Black-White Belcher, was a great deck last metagame challenge as well. I got a 7-0 with it last metagame challenge, and I played it a bit this time. I think I got 6 wins with it. I wasn't able to get 7 personally this time, but this deck's proved to be strong once again. You notice that its win rate has fallen off a little bit when compared to the other top decks, which is interesting. I don't perceive the deck to be bad necessarily, but it seems like it is just a step behind the tier 1 decks, and its win rate more aligns with the tier 2 stuff, which would be Shift and Tell. Green Belcher down here with just a 71 win rate. Green Belcher I do feel has fallen off a little bit. I had high hopes for this deck heading into like a future meta because I thought this would be the best Carpet of Flowers decks, but the best Carpet of Flowers deck, of course, is just Omnitel. Why would I ever try to think anything else? Shift and Tell is also a deck. It's still pretty good, but I think it's fallen off a little bit. I would have said this was a tier 1 deck a couple months ago. Now it's back solidly into tier 2. You can kind of see around these win rates, you could form tier 1, tier 2. Tier 1 is able to get an 80 win rate with this big sample size. Tier 2 gets in the low to mid 70s, and tier 3 are decks that are more down here. Gruul Gift is a deck that I love. I love playing this deck, and I even played it this metagame challenge, but it really felt like it fell off. I don't think it can compete with the current builds of Show and Tell. Show and Tell is very good. That was never a good matchup for them. It absolutely cannot compete with fast combo. It can kind of deal with energy, but a lot of energy gamers are now just playing the One Ring in their deck, and they'll beat you. So I think this deck in particular really, really fell off. It's cool to see the slow natural evolution of combo decks through the meta. Gen Breach did have a good weekend, though. And after a certain point, you have to understand that we are looking at a pretty small sample size, especially, at this point and below. So when you see an 87, 81, 84 win rate, understand that it was just, in this case, 5 runs, mostly by one pilot. So you just have one very good player who's focused and locked in and trying to do their best, and in some cases 7-0ing. The only mid-range deck to 7-0 was Abzan Ritual, Birthing Ritual, that is, playing Bright Glass Geargulk. This is the exact same deck list as Greenmeyer's rank 1 deck from a couple months ago, if I recall correctly. And that went on a nice double 7-0 run, actually, which is crazy. I think the guy, it was Trail, who got the 7-0 with it, got 2 7-0s in a day with it, which is awesome, but also posted some 0-1s, which is funny. I screwed up my spreadsheet. There we go. In addition to combo and mid-range running around, we do have some tempo and control decks. There were a lot of blue X tempo decks coming through. The Kaito deck that Cheshair won the last tournament with got 2 7-0s, which was awesome to see. Psychic Frog also pulled an okay win rate at 70%, and Steel Cutter variants at 75%. Keep in mind, small sample sizes. There's not that much difference here. A single, 7-0 run for Frog, for example, would, catapult its win rate a lot, as would a single 0-1. So don't read too hard into them, but these are still very fun and playable strategies that were represented. And the one thing that I haven't mentioned yet which I think is the coolest deck to come out of the weekend, is Bogo Blue. By the way, we are voting on what we think is the coolest and most impressive deck to come out of the weekend. If you 7-0'd with energy, you're not in the poll, I'm sorry, but if you want to check the Discord channel really quick, it's open for another day or two. We're voting on who wins, and I think Bogo Blue is winning by a lot. So Bogo Blue was invented by a bunch of the blue mages on the Discord, namely 17 writers who we all just call Bogo at this point for some reason. And the deck has now also just been called Bogo Blue. It is built kind of with a similar philosophy to the really controlling Psychic Frog decks. If you remember those, they're playing Flareback, they're playing Subtlety in the main deck, you're able to support Commandeer in the sideboard. So you end up with like a really killer good unfair deck matchup. But it's now blue-white instead of blue-black. So you're not playing Psychic Frog, but you're able to play white removal, you're able to play Wrath of the Skies, and all the good white removal to absolutely crap on energy. So now you have a great energy matchup and a great fast combo matchup as a control deck. It also plays Harbinger of the Seas, which is a fantastic card against Mardu, turns out. Also a great card against the currently built very greedy Show and Tell mana bases. Great card against the Belcher mana bases that don't have basics. It's getting interesting, right? I love the pile. It was a really good, really creative blue pile. It ended up getting 2 7-0s by 2 different players, and it has a very high win rate, mostly just because it was played very little. It was only played by very good control players who are super in touch with the meta and trying to beat it. But I am really impressed with the deck building here. I think this is really cool. I think we can learn a lot of lessons from this. I was worried. I was thinking control would be kind of dead heading into this metagame challenge. But a couple guys have proved me wrong lately. This has proved me wrong. We've also had, it wasn't in this metagame challenge, like the last tournament, we had the Free You Mind, Orim's Chant plus Teferi Lock blue-white deck do better than I thought it would, which is always cool to see. So control is alive in this format. I was worried that you can't play control. And by the way, like the win condition in this deck is like 1 copy of Timeless Dragon and turning your shield back sideways. Like it is a slow deck. It is a real control deck. We are not playing Psychic Frogs or anything that can let us get an aggro win at all. It's true proper control. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. Curious to see if that can be improved because we know it has a good energy matchup. We know it has a good fast combo matchup. I'm curious if it still has a good show and tell matchup because that's a tough matchup. I'm curious if it's good against blue decks that play a higher density of threats because at least my intuition states that these control decks can trade on resources, but the deck that has Psychic Frog and Kaito in it is going to be able to stick those value cards and get value over time from them. At least that's my thinking. And I'm also curious if you play it against like a truly good energy player who knows what's up, do you still beat like the good energy player? We got to test that. I need to message the blue mages and challenge them to a 1v1 so that we can figure that out. Right. Oh, and I should scroll to the bottom and show all the other cool decks. Esper Clones is one of the other ones that we voted, or that we're voting on. Oh, by the way, the vote is between Clones, Gear Hulk, Bogo Blue, and I think Kaito. The 4 decks that we say were the coolest out of the decks that 7-0'd. And then down here we have some other ideas for decks. We have we have Bogo Land Destruction down here, rocking the O2 at the bottom. And some other ideas, mostly things that somebody ran through the challenge once. There were some really cool ones that succeeded. Like, for example, somebody played Samwise Combo. I only saw they did 1 run with it. At least that's all that they reported to me, and they got 6 wins with it, which is awesome. That's a really cool and interesting one to see. Somebody took my 5-color humans list from like a week or 2 for a run. That was cool. And there was also a mid-range list that got a 6-1 out of nowhere. So these are things to watch about. It's things that make me think. Because the point of this data, at least to me, is to get me thinking about the format where there might be room for improvement. So we can continue to improve on control. And I feel like mid-range is really underrepresented here. So I kind of want to solve it because we can see mid-range can get 6 wins, it can get 7 wins. So can we figure out a formula for a consistently good mid-range deck? Segueing into my next topic, let's talk about some graphs. On the right, which is directly above me here, these are the charts from 6 months ago. And then here, on the other side of the screen, are the charts from today, or this weekend. 6 months ago, holy moly, would you look at that metagame split. It was almost 50-50 aggro combo. It was the energy versus show and tell meta. This aggro was almost 99% energy, and I'm not exaggerating with that. 40% of that meta was just energy, and most of this combo was show and tell. It was truly an energy versus show and tell meta, and we're seeing that start to break down. Energy's meta share and aggro's meta share is decreasing, which is awesome. We're seeing a lot more combo decks, but it's not all show and tell. We're seeing a variety of both fast combo and slow combo with roughly equal shares, both a bit over a quarter. The one thing that I did notice is that mid-range is kind of dying. Mid-range really fell off, and I got to agree. I don't see people playing Baelmerk mid-range on ladder or in the challenge. I don't see people playing like scam variants. I don't see people playing beans. I don't see people playing those terrible Yorion decks that people insist on playing. I don't see anybody doing the Esper rescam. I feel like a lot of mid-range decks have fallen off, and it is kind of a symptom of how much combo there is in the format. It's very difficult to play mid-range into combo because you need to be able to both interact on turn one to beat this fast combo down here, and you also need to be able to interact multiple times to beat slow combo over here. So it's a very tough ask for mid-range deck, and you have to beat energy. Can you build a mid-range deck to do that? It's easier to build like a tempo or a control deck that leverages a lot of blue to interact with those decks. But can you do that like with a Baelmerk in your deck? Probably not. It's tough. I'm curious. I'm gonna work on it. Even earlier today, I was toying with the idea of trying to bring like an Esper rescam deck back. I was thinking about it. Played a couple games. I don't know if it's great, but I'm gonna keep thinking about it. And that's why I love doing this analysis because you figure out like what is underappreciated in the format right now. All right, this is the same graph as above, but I actually did separate Omnitel and Energy out. If you look at this last time, Mardu Energy, this is stock Mardu Energy was 37%, other energy is 6%. We see a lot more variety, thankfully. Mardu's meta share pretty much got cut in half. It's still a great deck, best deck or the second best deck according to most people, but the actual amount of Mardu running around has gotten down quite a bit. Omnitel did go up though, and that's just because Omnitel is the best deck in the format right now, period, in my opinion. Energy is really the only thing that comes close. And the Omnitel majors were having fun. They were absolutely thriving. Here's a very sad graph from last time. I broke down all the aggro decks, and my point was that there is so much energy in this format. Look at this. Holy moly, look. This was last time, so we were at 99.6% energy. I can't remember what this 3 was from last time. I think it was a Jund list. I'm not sure. I think it was Luris Jund. Here, again, kind of small sample size. You're running up against the sample size of people in my Discord. But we do see a lot of new non-energy aggro decks. And in fact, I think this is not representative of ladder as a whole, because this here, which I've called Rakdos Luris, these are the new decks that feature Corey Steelcutter, Dreadhorde Arcanist propped up by Swiftspear's teachings. I saw this a lot in the metagame challenge in terms of my opponents. However, in terms of the people that we had in Discord who were sharing their results, I think only 1 or 2 people actually played this. This is becoming a more and more popular deck on ladder. I think if this was slightly more representative of ladder data, it would look a bit more like this. But we got the data we got. So even if these are underrepresented, we're already showing that Energy's dominance of aggro decks is starting to get figured out. People are figuring out other aggro decks that can work. Esper Clones is Dem's list. It does use the Guide of Souls card, unfortunately, so maybe you could call it energy if you squint really hard, but that's the only energy card in the deck. It uses Guide Pride, but it also uses Mockingbird, Meddling Mage, the clone effect, the other clone effect, Phantasmal Image, Lavinia, Bowmaster, Psychic Frog, all the good Esper cards, plus the clone effects in a pile, plus Thoughtseize, Peddler, and Friends. It's a cool deck. Somewhat adjacent to energy and how it plays, but it's different enough that I'm happy to not call it energy on this graph. And that's a cool list that people can continue to work on. And yeah, there is more aggro decks too. Like there's also Gen Delirium, which I think nobody picked up. I think that's still a playable deck. Like I feel like there is a deck that needs to be figured out in like the Luris Jund slash Rakdos sphere, because we got a lot of good cards. Gen Delirium was a playable deck before, and we got multiple new cards, especially Swiftspear's Teaching, which really juices it up. Swiftspear's Teachings is like an amazingly pushed alchemy card. It's pushed in a good way where it doesn't like totally ruin formats, but it really enables an interesting creature strategy. So maybe I'll try to spend some time on that as well, see if we can figure out a really good build. A couple weeks ago when people started posting like Rakdos Luris builds, I posted one that was Jund. It's Splash for Cascading Footfalls, or Crashing Footfalls it's called. And that was really fun. I don't know if that's an optimal version, but there's definitely a lot of ways to build it. As for variety within creature decks, once again, we're seeing more variety than last time. That's good. Mardu energy was this much last time, with other energy being all the blue. I colored them, all the energy, so that they're similar. Same thing here. We had two kinds of Mardu. We had the Lurrus companion version, where you were always keeping Lurrus as your companion, and then the One Ring version. I didn't explain the difference between these decks, did I? No, because I think on the first page, I actually mostly skipped it, because it's not that interesting. But the idea is that if you want to beat the Mardu mirror, actually, this is interesting. The win rate's lower. If you want to beat the Mardu mirror, then you can play cards like Flageon, the One Ring, in your sideboard, and then you can sideboard out Lurrus. Or you could just play a Giganta companion the whole time instead of a Lurrus companion. My original thinking was that Giganta companion would be better. This is something I registered for a tournament like 3 months ago. It was the first 1K. And the current evolution of that thought is that you should just play Lurrus and sideboard out the Lurrus when you're bringing in the One Rings. So a lot of us, including me, did some runs with this version of energy. And it ended up posting an overall lower version, or overall lower score, win rate, than the other energy. And that makes sense because we're in a very heavy combo meta. And that version of energy is really counting on playing up against other creature decks and beating up on the creature decks, right? So for this heavy combo meta, it's probably the best choice to just stick with the Lurrus version that focuses on beating up on combo. So that aside, we do have a lot of variety here in all sorts of creature decks that we can play. Before, the non-energy creature decks were down to, I don't know, what's this, 20% roughly? And half of them were the same Psychic Frog deck. Now we're at 35-ish%, just eyeballing this. And we have multiple different blue tempo builds. We have multiple different, mid-range style builds, multiple different aggro style builds that you can see these two over here. So creature variety in the meta is slowly increasing. You could say that this is because people are getting bored of energy, but I would actually disagree because of how we're pulling our data, right? This is from the Metagame Challenge. People are trying to 7-0. They're trying to spike the format. They're not necessarily trying to play their pet deck. So my data is going to be more concentrated on the top decks than ladder data. So the fact that Mardu's meta share went down when people were trying to 7-0 here and people were still trying to 7-0 here tells me that people are figuring out how to play non-energy creature decks much better, which is good. That means the meta, even though energy is still at the top, the meta is slowly moving into a more diverse direction. All right, combo deck variety. I was surprised by how similar these graphs are. I think I'm covering the bottom of that one. There we go. Look how similar they are, actually. The Omnitel percentage is almost exactly the same. Black-White Belcher is the next biggest deck on both of them. And then we've just replaced the Dark Ritual deck that comes next. And then we've replaced the slow combo deck that comes next after that, right? Interesting. But it does show that there is still a healthy variety within the combo decks. It's not just one or two combo decks that's completely dominating. Especially in fast combo, there are a bunch of different fast combo decks that you can put together. Obviously, Omnitel is still the best. I'm going to keep saying the same things again and again. But we are seeing more variety in the format, which is really sweet. All right, and here's all the 7-0s. We actually see a perfectly balanced 9 and 9 7-0s from Mardu Energy versus Show and Tell. So congrats to everybody here who was able to pull off a 7-0 with their particular deck. I did color code everything here again, so all of the aggro decks are orange over here. We got our purple slow combos, our pink/red fast combos, and then only one deck from each of the other archetypes. But it's also cool that we got a 7-0 from every archetype. So as much as I just said a few minutes ago that mid-range is kind of dead, we were able to still see a mid-range 7-0 pop up. So congrats to all the guys here. It was 24 people this time who got the 7-0. If you are not on this list and you did post a 7-0, please remind me. I'm sorry I missed you. And I will give you the Discord role, because that means you also did not get your Discord role if you are not here. I did double check that I had the same number of people in both places. So congrats to everybody on the list. The timeless meta is stale. I mean, that's part of why I haven't been playing as much and why I haven't been posting videos, is that, it's still just an energy and show and tell meta. I feel like there's not that much room for evolution of the meta and for deck building right now. I'm hopeful that the Edge of Eternity's bonus sheet in particular might shake up the format a lot, because there's a lot of room for some crazy cards to get printed. Crazy lands. You can list off the names, but I won't dare say any of them out loud, not to jinx them. But I can think of 5 or 10 different cards that would have significant impacts on the format, and they would meet the criteria for being on that bonus sheet of just being an iconic land. And Wizards wants to make money. They're going to print the bangers on that sheet. Surely they're not going to spend 10 of the slots giving us all the pain lands. Surely not. So I'm hopeful. I mean, I was taking a soft break from Timeless and the content. That's why I played so much this weekend too, because I hadn't been playing that much Timeless. And I was like, oh yeah, let me just get like a dozen or more runs in and super degen it and just have fun. And I had so much fun jamming it. I think I'm going to not make too many more videos immediately in the future, like between now and when Edge of Eternities comes out, because Final Fantasy didn't impact the format. I don't feel like I have anything to add. I would just be replaying old decks or maybe trying to play like one of these new ones here, playing this or playing Clones. Where's Clones? Clones. Clones is cool. I want to work on this deck. I also want to work on Rakdos Lyris. There's a bunch of decks I want to work on, and hopefully, if Edge of Eternities has a big impact, expect a lot of videos. If it doesn't, I will still probably play a little bit and then maybe make a video or two on this as we try to figure it out. Or maybe I'll try to refine Bogo Blue with the boys. I can be the Mardu player to play against as we figure that out. Either way, I'm looking forward to the future. I'm hoping that 2025 will be a big year for Timeless and that we'll see a lot of shakeups in the next couple of months. Of course, it's an eternal format, so a shakeup would just be adding some new decks to the format. We don't need to like completely destroy the thing and tear it down like it's a rotating format. I understand that it's going to go slow, but hopefully we get blessed by a good bonus sheet up coming up and we have a bunch of cool new stuff to work on in the future. All right. If you want to contribute to any of that, if any of that stuff I said sounds cool, join the Discord server. We talk about this sort of stuff all the time. We're constantly building decks in there, and we also do cool things like keeping track of our stats after the metagame challenge. So if you want to be in the next video for the metagame challenge, join the Discord. See you there.